Okay, I think we can get this started.
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to this library offering for June 11, 2025. I am Elizabeth Holt, the Digital Initiatives Librarian and School of Graduate Studies Liaison for LSU Health New Orleans. And today I want to share information and resources with you on the topic of accessibility. And as a promoter of accessibility during this presentation, at times I will be reading the text on my slides before delving into the details. And this is an easy example of presenting information in multiple formats, in this case visual and audible, so as to improve accessibility for all users. During this session, I will go over a brief definition of accessibility in general, as well as in the context of digital information and scholarly works. I'll explain national guidelines and institutional policies regarding accessibility, some examples of what that functionality looks like for the user, and then some relevant tools and resources available to the scholarly content creating community. So what is accessibility? Accessibility is the design of products, services, vehicles, or environments to improve usability to differently abled groups. Accessibility for digital content is determined and enforced under the WCAG portion of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. All users can benefit from accessibility features. So the ADA was made into law in 1990 and addresses accommodations for both physical and mental conditions. We are very familiar with accessibility features in our built environments, such as ramps or automatic door openers, service animals, braille touchpads, etc. But accommodations under the ADA that are specific to digital content fall under the WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are technical standards that help make the digital world accessible to people with disabilities. It isn't a law, but organizations that want to comply with the ADA should follow WCAG standards. And as the name implies, these guidelines are for web content, since that is where the bulk of digital content lives. These accessibility features include audio description for video images, mouse arrow, icon, or font size options, voice-controlled web page navigation, or alternatively, keyboard-only website navigation, and then clear, simple, and consistent language used across a website. But for the purpose of this overview today, I will focus on the policies and tools that are relevant to digitized or born digital scholarly works. While most content that we encounter now is born digital, that is, it was created in digital form, be an electronic article or a streaming audio or video track, at times we also interact with digitized records, such as a print document that has been scanned and saved as a PDF, then shared electronically. And only sometimes, in few and far between cases, will an accessibility tool's functionality or purpose be affected by whether the work is born digital or is digitized. And as the slide explains, the WCAG is a set of standards and guidelines for complying with sections of the ADA. And itself, it's not a law. So what are those standards and guidelines? Compliance is guided by Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, which dates back to the 1970s, but was updated to include digital content in the late 90s. So that's 508 standards of the Rehabilitation Act, requires federal agencies to ensure that their electronic and information technology is accessible to people with disabilities. So that includes compliance with accessibility standards for websites, software, and other digital communications. And then there's Section 255 of the Communications Act from 1934, which was also overhauled in the 90s and renamed the Telecommunications Act. So this covers technical requirements for the design, development, and fabrication of the telecommunications equipment and the equipment at the customer's home, the content and support documentation and services to ensure accessibility and usability by individuals with disabilities. So again, these guidelines are primarily devised for federal agencies and their partners that need to comply with the ADA. But because so much of the same tech and software is used by both federal agencies and private entities, you will see the tools developed to comply in governmental settings as features in your personal devices and software and the websites you visit. So there's a lot of text on these next two slides on accessibility policy statements found on PubMed, ProQuest, EBSCO, and Clinical Key, just as examples, which I don't really need to go into detail on. But the point I want to make is that everybody in the digital publishing business and scholarly communications platforms has an accessibility policy statement somewhere on their website. And they all say the same thing. We strive to meet the highest level of compliance possible. And if you, the user, are having difficulties accessing our content, please reach out to us. Some of these publishers will also mention EU standards, which is an important consideration for international collaboration. Another one here includes the acronym that's often used for describing accessibility goals, and that is POUR, which stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Now that we have some background, let's examine what accessibility looks like for scholarly works. Historically, a scholarly article or presentation, especially in the medical and health sciences, will be a lengthy, wordy document with figures, tables, diagrams, and sharing highly detailed information. So accessibility guidelines tell us that information needs to also be shared through a selection of alternative means to best accommodate an array of users. And that would look like adding captions to images, or alt text, as it's called in these standards and guidelines, or enabling transcription or closed captioning on videos, running scanned documents through an OCR program, or that's optical character recognition program, or correcting the HTML tags in a document to improve text-to-speech functionality. Here are examples of the features I just described, plus a few more, and I'm guessing they will all be very familiar to you. So OCR, or optical character recognition, is the tool that allows copy-paste functions, search functions for PDFs, or digitized documents in general, but it is also very necessary for text-to-speech software to work. Closed captioning is very familiar to everyone. So this is a setting that a conference organizer or a presenter wants to ensure will function on the user end. Speech-to-text functionality should be offered if an author or presenter or organization is requesting feedback from the user community. Alt text or captioning of images assists text-to-speech add-ons so a user with limited vision can have the image described to them. Increasing font size is easy and effective. A sign language interpreter during a live event is an example of accessibility accommodations before digitization. And in practice, this would look like an ASL interpreter standing next to the speaker at an event and clearly visible within the frame of the video recording. So that accommodation will carry from the live event to the digitized record. And lastly, text-to-speech add-ons. To be as accurate and effective as possible, this one can require a fair amount of checking and altering on the back end, for reasons I will go into more on the next slide. All right, accessibility checkers in general are found on all the major document or file creating software options. Here we have Adobe. So Adobe has the Scan plus OCR tool that we are likely pretty familiar with. But further down the tools menu, you'll find the Prepare for Accessibility icon. And there you can run an accessibility check for the document overall. You can add alt text. You can make sure the headings and tables, titles, and the text body are all tagged correctly so the user's text-to-speech software will accurately read the document. You can check for optimized color contrast. There are a lot of tools in there in that Prepare for Accessibility option. Microsoft Word has an accessibility checker under the Review tab, where the author can create an interactive outline of the document, much like what Adobe offers, as well as tools for adding alt text to images, evaluating color choice and contrast, and adjusting the document's access restrictions. Google Docs has accessibility functions under the Tools tab, but currently these tools really only interact with the user end add-ons or software, such as a Braille reader or a screen magnifier. The PDF Accessibility Checker, or PAC, is similar to Adobe's Document Tag Checker, but is a free and open access download. So if you don't have the Adobe suite, you can use PAC. And as I said, text-to-speech functionality depends on a document being tagged correctly. So that means the title is tagged with the HTML code for title, each header is tagged with the HTML code for header, each row or column in a table has the correct corresponding HTML tags, etc. And no lie, this can seem like a laborious undertaking at first glance. But HTML is not difficult. There are many tutorials and cheat sheets out there, and there are less than a dozen options to assign the sections of a document. And most importantly, the results of a correctly tagged PDF can be very meaningful for the user. So online databases and academic publishers like the one I mentioned before should be taking care of this on their end for the digital articles or journals they publish. But for conference papers or white papers or data sets that you are creating and disseminating on your own, this is a valuable addition to include in your workflow. As for adding subtitles to audio and alt text to images, there are many options now, such as Subtitle Edit or Otter AI. Subtitle Edit is free. Otter AI offers a suite of subscription AI meeting assistant products, but it does offer free trials. YouTube offers subtitle functionality, as does Zoom. And do note for Zoom, you have to select the cloud recording setting before the session begins in order to engage that built-in transcription functionality. Most of these softwares and add-ons rely on AI now, and the larger software companies and platforms like Microsoft, Amazon, or Apple are already offering captioning and transcription functionality with their products and services. So looking at resources, we have the U.S. Access Board. Their tagline is advancing full access and inclusion for all. And within that section is the information and communication technology. That's where you would find the 508 standards and the 255 guidelines. And the Web Accessibility Initiative, or WAI, which develops strategies, standards, and supporting resources to make the web accessible to people with disabilities. So the WAI is a group within the World Wide Web Consortium, or the W3C. And then the U.S. Access Board is a federal agency. These two websites are the governing bodies for all things accessibility in terms of digital content. though you do have to sift around a little to get past the many solely web-focused suggestions and resources. There are countless companies online to guide website builders in maximizing accessibility, but since we are not building websites, we are rather looking at scholarly content in terms of individual items or events that we want to share. So the heavy lifting will be done by the PDF checkers of your choice and or the video creating, editing, and sharing platforms of your choice, and using their built-in accessibility tools. The takeaway here is to make sure what you are sharing has been optimized for accessibility, be it by allowing transcription functionality in the settings, or by adding captions to your images, or checking the HTML tags for your tables. Again, so that rows are labeled as rows and columns are labeled as columns, etc. Here are 2 articles that address improving accessibility in shared scientific research. This is a growing consideration, and with so many tools, software, and functionalities being developed all the time, we can expect this body of research to grow. In the Journal of Business and Technology Law, we have the article, A Socio-Legal Framework for Improving the Accessibility of Research Articles for People with Disabilities, by Brian Wentz, Jonathan Lazar, Paul T. Yeager, and Ursula Gorham. And that dates back to 2021. And in the ACS Chemical Health and Safety Journal, there is Beyond the Visual, Achieving Accessibility in Scientific Figures, by Hannah Ramsey and Imke Schroeder, and that goes to 2025. So the first article discusses the reality of open access in scientific research if users with different abilities or disabilities can't access much of that scholarly content. It explores the attitudes and practices within the scholarly journal publishing community, and then goes into practical solutions for consideration. As I said, it was written in 2021, so many advances have been made since on the professional and the publishing side, but this still has helpful information for the individual researcher wanting to improve the accessibility of their unpublished or self-published works. The second article is a great discussion on all things posters, charts, diagrams, and other visual elements in scientific research and articles. It offers very approachable and implementable suggestions. So that wraps up my presentation on accessibility. I thank you very much for joining me. I believe this presentation and the slideshow will be available on the LSU Health Library's YouTube page, as well as in our Digital Scholar and through the library website. I have 2 QR codes. One is to complete the survey. I believe it's just 4 or 5 quick questions. And then one that links to our Instagram page. So I'll wait and see if there are any questions in the chat. Any questions in the room? All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me.